All right, so we are recording today's session. It'll be available to you. We'll send that out to everyone after the session. It might take a couple of days for us to get all of that sent out. So please, please take advantage of that recording. You're welcome to share that with other people. We also will, I believe, be posting this one on our YouTube channel as well. And we'll take a break maybe partway through today's session, and I can put the link to the YouTube channel in the chat at that time. We are using Zoom today. If you're unfamiliar with Zoom, there is both a chat function, which is what many of you guys are using right now. We're getting lots of thumbs up in the chat. Appreciate that, and welcome. As folks are joining in, if you let me know where you're joining from, we've got people from all over today. So there's the Zoom chat. You're able to message everybody in the Zoom chat. You're also able, there should be like a blue button in the chat window that allows you to message just the hosts and panelists. So that would be just Lori and I today. There is also the option of Zoom Q&A, which should also be in your Zoom ribbon at the bottom of your Zoom window. Zoom Q&A gives you the option to ask a question anonymously if you would prefer to do that. Your other participants can also see those questions, but you can ask the question anonymously. For today's session, at the very end, I'll put in a SurveyMonkey link into the chat. So I want to make sure that everybody has found the Zoom chat. We'll put that SurveyMonkey link in for your certificate of attendance so that you can get that for today's event. It isn't instantaneous. I want to make sure folks understand that. It does take a little bit of time for us to process that information. So you'll get it maybe this week, probably more likely next week. The other thing that I want to make sure folks know, I know we have a lot of people who have worked in the construction industry or in highway maintenance, and maybe we haven't always worn our earplugs. I know that I am guilty of that. So if you need closed captioning, that is available to you. Again, it's in the Zoom ribbon as an option. If you don't see it in the Zoom ribbon, you might look for it either, it should say more or maybe 3 dots. You should be able to find it in there. Let us know if you have any issues and we'll try and help you out. The last piece here is that, again, we're going to be using Mentimeter today. So I know some more folks have joined as we've been going through this. So let me put the Mentimeter instructions up, and I will turn my camera off so that you have the ability to grab that QR code. If you're using a smartphone, you can grab the QR code. If you don't have a smartphone available to you or handy, you can also open up a browser window and go to menti.com and enter in that 8-digit code. This isn't required by any means. If you don't want to participate with that is totally fine. You can also, as I'm going through, I'm going to be asking some questions. Some of them are multiple choice. Some of them are type in your answers. You can always use the chat to answer if you would prefer. Mentimeter does not, you don't have to make an account or anything. You also don't have to download any apps in order to use it. It's just through your browser on your phone or your computer. And it is completely anonymous. I can't link back your answers to any one person, so that is helpful. You can be true to yourself as you go through these questions, and we won't be able to find any guilty parties. So please use the Mentimeter. Like I said, it's definitely not required. You still will get a certificate of attendance if you don't use it. But if you do use it, it makes things a lot more fun for both me and for you. So I'm gonna give you just another couple of seconds. If you need any more time in the chat, holler. And I will wait just a little bit, but otherwise let's.
Jane had a quick question.
Sure.
About how do you do the thumbs up?
Oh, so the thumbs up, if you've joined the Mentimeter, there should be a little thumbs up on your screen that you can tap. And yeah, we got lots of thumbs ups now. You can also use in if you're in the Zoom chat, there's a little smiley face, and you can put a thumbs up in the chat too. All right, yeah, we got lots of thumbs up. Perfect. All right. As I said before, the menti.com and that code is at the top of every single one of these slides. So you can also join that way at any time if you get booted out or anything. All right. let's go through what we're going to be talking about today. So today's learning goals, we're going to be talking about planning your meetings with a goal in mind. We're going to be talking about how to use some strategies to achieve those goals. We're going to be talking about some meeting documents that you are going to want to be using on a regular basis with your meetings, including agendas and meeting minutes, and how to get the most out of those documents. And then we are going to be talking about some facilitation skills that will be applicable for every one of your meetings. And then talking at the end about some follow-ups after your meeting to ensure some accountability for some of the things that you might have discussed in your meeting. All right. So some disclaimers about what this session will not be. So this session isn't going to be talking about public meetings. So like an official public meeting, something like maybe a city board meeting, or maybe a road commissioners meeting, or a county commissioners meeting, something like that that's like a official public meeting. Those are governed by Robert's Rules of Order, and we're not going to get into that today. If you want me to talk about that at some point in the future, we can, but that is not what we're going to be talking about today. This is more about somewhat informal meetings, and not necessarily non-formal meetings, but not meetings that are required to use Robert's Rules of Order. This also isn't going to talk about one-on-one meetings, like maybe if you have a mentorship relationship with somebody and you're doing a one-on-one, or maybe if you are an supervisor, or you're doing performance reviews, or even just check-ins with your employees. That's not what we're going to be talking about today. And then the last piece is that this is not going to go over contentious meetings, so maybe meetings that you are expecting to have some conflict in them. So Lori, can you talk a little bit about that piece?
Yes, if that interests you, actually, about having some more information about how to manage difficult meetings and navigate your way through those. We have a couple classes coming up on navigating difficult situations. So stay tuned, go to our website and look for that. We'll talk a little bit maybe about it at the end too. That will talk a little bit about what we're doing today, but we'll go deeper. So if you want to go deeper, keep that in mind.
Yes, awesome. Thank you, Lori. So those, this meeting, we are assuming that everybody's going into it with maybe if not friendly relationships, at least not contentious relationships, somewhat neutral ground, and the topics that you're going to be discussing in this meeting are hopefully, a neutral topic. So this is our first Menti question. This one is one that you will type your answers in. So what does a meeting facilitator do? This session is about meeting facilitation. I'm going to have a hard time saying that throughout this whole thing. All right, we're getting some answers in. Running the meeting, keeping the meeting on task. Lots of the same idea here. Keeping the meeting going, keeping people on track with whatever the goals for the meeting are. That's great. Making sure everything can get covered. Yeah, if you had specific goals for the meeting, that you get to all of them. I like this one, stimulating productive conversation. We'll talk a little bit about productive and unproductive conversations. Making sure everybody has the opportunity to be heard. That's really crucial to this as well. These are all good skills. Leading and guiding the meeting. Yeah. Setting the agenda, administering the agenda. Keeping the agenda items in conversation, keeping everybody on task for whatever we're talking about. Escalating concerns to get progress. Delegation, that's another piece of this.
In the chat, we have keeping accurate meeting minutes as
Yep.
well.
Okay. We'll talk about meeting minutes later on today. Following an agenda, time management, keeping people engaged. Yep. All right. I think that we've got a good handle on what a meeting facilitator does. Now, some of the things that we're talking about here, I may disagree, are maybe not meeting facilitator roles, but here's another question for you. Why do we have meetings? And I know all of us are in many meetings. Some of us are in meetings all day, every day. But what are some reasons, like why should you have a meeting? Excellent. So we've got Awesome, guys. Thank you for participating with this. This makes it a little bit more engaging for everybody. So informing people about things, collaborating with people, making decisions, having accountability, because emails do not exist. Sometimes, yes, sometimes we will talk about the fact that there are some meetings that should have been an email, right? Aligning goals and discussing progress, exchanging ideas, getting everybody on the same page, sure. Sharing information, tracking progress, tracking action items, moving projects forward. I see a lot of good reasons. Connecting with other people, getting some clarifications or requirements. And I know not everybody in this group is, we've got a variety of folks who are maybe in the private sector or in working for a public agency, distributing information, making decisions, conveying information. All right. So one of the things with having a meeting is that you should go into the meeting with something that you are trying to get out of it, right? You should have a goal. You should have a desired outcome for this meeting. And part of that means that you should set a goal. And if you're unfamiliar with SMART goals, SMART is an acronym that stands for specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound, right? So if we're going to have a meeting, we need to go into it with a goal, and that goal should be set using these parameters. So you want to have a specific goal. Maybe there's more than one goal, but all of them should be something specific that by the end of this meeting, we're going to make a decision. By the end of this meeting, we are going to have brainstormed 3 ideas, something like that, something that's specific, something that's measurable. So like I said, by the end of this meeting, we will have made a decision. That is a measurable thing. Did you make the decision? Did you not make the decision? Or we have generated 3 ideas. That is a measurable thing. Or maybe it is we have established what the goals of the project are, right? That would be a measurable thing. We have a direction to go in. They need to be, whatever your goals are for your meeting, they need to be achievable, right? So you're probably not going to plan out and execute an entire design for a new road or new bridge within one meeting. That's a lot to do. So there are going to be subsequent meetings to that. So you want to make sure that whatever you're trying to tackle within that meeting, maybe, for example, at the beginning of a project, you might have what's called like a design charrette, where you are looking at a project and getting everybody on the same page, all the different engineering disciplines. Maybe you have a contractor, you've got a big group of people that is going to be working together on this. Those types of large project kickoff meetings for really big projects, those can be multiple days, right? You're not trying to cram that into a 20-minute session over a lunch hour. So you want to make sure that you are setting yourself up for success in terms of what you're trying to accomplish within the time frame. You also want to make sure that your goals are relevant, right? If you're having a meeting about a specific project, you don't want to start veering off and talking about other things during that meeting. And then the last piece is that this is time bound, right? So we don't want to set a meeting for so far into the future that it drops off of everybody's radar and they've forgotten what the meeting was about and what you're trying to accomplish for that meeting. All right. So we want to think about what outcome we're hoping to get out of this meeting. You should always have an outcome. If somebody comes to you and asks, why am I invited to this meeting? You should be able to answer them as to what you're hoping the meeting is going to accomplish and how that person is going to help that happen. So I've got another question for you. What are some outcomes or goals that warrant having a meeting? So some of the things that we talked about that you answered before, some of them were to inform people about something. So, a meeting, in terms of a meeting, we're working together for a collective goal. It's a group of people that are trying to accomplish something. If we are just informing people of something, that's maybe less of a meeting and more almost like a lecture, right? Which isn't necessarily a bad thing. Maybe you get people together and you deliver a message to a bunch of people all at once. But that's a little bit different than a meeting. The other piece with that is that depending on what information you're trying to convey to people, a better way to convey that might be in a written form. It might, we joke that like this meeting should have been an email. Sometimes that is better because that gives people a chance to refer back. So some of the goals, making decisions is a huge reason to have a meeting, right? We want to get everybody in the same room or on the same Zoom call and talk about this and make sure that we haven't overlooked anything, make sure that everybody's needs are being met. Progress meetings can also, because we call construction progress meetings, we call them progress meetings, but I think a better like term for it is really, it's a coordination meeting, right? Is the work that I'm doing, is that going to impact what you are doing? Is the work you're doing going to impact what I'm trying to do? Are we going to run into some kind of roadblock or impasse because my goals are directly opposed to what you are trying to do, right? Assigning tasks, getting multiple people the same information, the coordination piece of this, right? If we are purely informing people of things, maybe a meeting isn't necessarily the best course of action. But if we need everybody's input on something so that we can coordinate some work, then yeah, a meeting is a great reason to get people together. Delegating tasks, figuring out what's in the way for people. Sure, especially, so this is another one where, yes, potentially a meeting is a great reason, or this is a great reason to have a meeting, but if the people's tasks don't overlap or aren't integral to one another and their individual work doesn't require input from somebody else, that task delegation, sometimes what happens is you end up sitting around a room where you have a supervisor who is delegating tasks to different people, and they are having an interchange or exchange of what is being delegated, maybe any questions, and you've got a bunch of other people who are over here who are just kind of twiddling their thumbs because this doesn't really involve them. It doesn't also impact them, right? So in that case, this might be better as a one-on-one as opposed to a meeting of a group of people. Maybe subsequent one-on-ones, or maybe it is an email, or maybe it is a shared document where we can discuss what folks are doing. Do you have anything in the chat that we should?
I do. What would you say is the difference between informing and providing clarification?
Sure. Okay. So I think if you are making an announcement to a group of people, for example, I'd say if you're saying our expense report software has changed. We are using new expense report software. I don't know necessarily that needs to be, to start with at least, a meeting. That probably is an email. And then if people are having lots of the same questions, maybe we have a frequently asked question document that because some of those situations, especially when we are informing people, it's more helpful to have a document that people can refer back to than a meeting that is a one-time thing, because in this case, all right, we switch software. Every new person we hire is also going to need this information, and it's going to be a lot easier to just have a document that we share with them when they're being onboarded about how you submit your expense report than having that meeting every time, or also I have experiences where that person never does get that information. Lori is a fairly new employee. Lori, have you been trained on how to do our expense reports yet?
I have not.
See? Those are the types of things where it's more helpful a lot of times to have that as a physical document, something that can be updated as needed. Whereas clarification, especially if you've got people who are all working together, for example, our financial staff, our directors, if this is not working, that should be a meeting that they're talking about. Hey, we're having all of these problems. We're getting these are getting bounced back through our system all the time. Maybe that now is something that we need to have a meeting about.
So clarification is more about the threshold for a barrier. So if it can be answered in a frequently asked questions, start there. If it can be answered in a basic written training, start there. If people keep getting stuck, maybe consider having a meeting about it.
Yes. Especially it can be helpful. Maybe people are arriving at the same place. They're having the same problem, but maybe they're getting there in different ways. That can also be helpful. All right. Anything else in the chat that we should talk about?
Pretty much it is a lot of the same things that you got
Perfect.
on Mentimeter.
Awesome. All right. So, some possible meeting goals or outcomes that you might have. So, we talked about this. Making a decision is a great one. You want to get people together because you want to talk about maybe some of the consequences of some of these decisions, especially if you have groups of people that don't have a lot of overlap maybe in their day-to-day work, about what are some of the impacts for what you are currently doing if we go with this option versus this other option. Brainstorming ideas, the same idea, having people together, because I might come up with an idea that then you kind of piggyback on and expand and make better, as opposed to if we are all sitting alone and using a shared document, we might not have the same discussion and the same robustness of that discussion if we aren't actually having that conversation. Solving a problem is another one. It's the same idea, having some of that creativity and some of that collaboration that you get with having a meeting is going to be really important, especially if we have a problem. If we're trying to solve a problem and maybe there are, like I said, this meeting or this session isn't necessarily about having big conflicts, but sometimes even, it's a small problem. We all want to solve this problem, but making sure that everybody is on the same page with whatever the resolution to that problem is, so that people feel like they've been heard, and also so that people are able to express the impacts of whatever that decision or whatever that solution might be on them. Maybe this works for everybody, but you've just created 10 times more work for somebody, right? And having this collaboration and ability to walk through what some of the consequences might be is going to be really important. The other piece here is, like I said, with construction progress meetings, coordinating personnel, coordinating resources, especially if you are an agency that's got, or a consultant who has maybe shared vehicles, shared equipment, shared technology. How are we going to allocate this to make sure that the right people have what they need to get their job done when they need it? And, when we're coordinating personnel, especially on longer projects that are going for, maybe a year, maybe 2 years, maybe longer, do we have some coordination and some back training for somebody, if somebody gets sick, if somebody retires, if somebody goes on parental leave, all of those types of things. Do we have some backup? Do we know what everybody is doing, and can we coordinate to accommodate some of those things? It can be also really helpful to have a meeting to establish relationships and roles. If you've got a project that's just starting, having a kickoff meeting is great. We want to make sure that everybody, if not ideally going to the same place, but over Zoom if you are far away from one another, having that ability to put a face to a name is really important. The other piece with that is establishing the relationships between people, and maybe establishing hierarchy of if I have a question and I am asking maybe somebody from another company or from another agency, there's maybe 3 of you, who is the person that I should direct those questions? Is there a point of contact? And maybe what the roles are, who is in charge of what piece. Maybe you have one person that is answering questions about finances. Maybe you've got another person who is answering the technical questions. Who do I talk to about what thing, so that I am not clogging up everybody's email? Or maybe it's a situation where, hey, I want to be CC'd on everything that comes to my company, regardless of who is going to actually answer the question. Or maybe it's a situation where, like, please leave me out of this. I do not need any more emails, right? We can establish what those relationships are, what those roles, who's going to be in charge of what duties, especially if you've got maybe companies where, especially on big projects, where there might be some overlap of who is going to take care of this piece, who's going to take care of that piece. So those are all things, reasons to have a meeting. And then sometimes an impromptu meeting, right? All hands on deck. Everything has gone to crap and we need everybody to pull together, right? Things have gone very poorly, or we have something out of the blue has come up with a project, and we need we need to get everybody on the same page because things have changed drastically, right? Do we have any other things in the chat?
No, but I would add too on what you said on establishing relationships and roles, that sometimes you might need to have a meeting to improve the culture of the
Yes.
people on that team and in that meeting. And that's a reasonable thing to do.
Yes.
To have a meeting just for that.
Yeah, I think that establishing relationships and roles, oftentimes I'm certainly guilty of this. We assume that we do it once. We've done it at the beginning of the project kickoff, and then we never have to think about that ever again, which is not necessarily the case, especially if we have, if, like I say, you have somebody who cycles in to your project team, having another meeting establishing those relationships and roles is going to be important. Or if there is some friction within your group, having another meeting to kind of establish relationships and roles and kind of a reset of our project. Awesome. All right. So considering what your current meetings are is going to be important, right? So I'm sure that many of you have recurring meetings on your calendar right now, and I would really encourage you to take a look at what those meetings are and ask yourselves these questions. So is the meeting essential for achieving your goals? If it isn't, maybe you don't need to be attending that meeting. Is the meeting consistently productive, right? So sometimes we are having meetings and some of them are productive and some of them aren't. And some of the reason for that is just the timing of the meeting. Like we're having a weekly meeting and maybe it really only needs to be a monthly meeting. Or maybe the opposite, right? Maybe we're not having this meeting. I don't want to put more meetings on your calendar, but sometimes that is the problem, is that this meeting isn't productive because we're not having it frequently enough. Is this meeting happening at the right frequency? So that's our next piece. Would anybody complain if this meeting just went away? Sometimes we fall into a situation where we're just going through the motions. We've always done it this way. We've always had this meeting. It's always been this way. And nobody has really questioned, do we have to keep doing this? And as soon as somebody brings that up, it's like, no, actually, this meeting doesn't need to be on anybody's calendar. I don't know why we're doing this. And then the last piece is, can this meeting be replaced with something else? So could it be replaced with maybe a meeting that is a smaller meeting? Maybe we don't need all of the people that are in this meeting. Could it be replaced with an email or a shared document, maybe a shared spreadsheet or a shared Word document, something like that, where people can put in updates or maybe put in resources that they would like to check out, or maybe it's a shared calendar that you use. Sometimes we have these things that are other options for us that aren't a meeting and are actually more productive than a meeting would be, especially if your meeting ends up being one person who's leading the meeting, talking one-on-one with folks, while the other people kind of just exist. That, for one, is something that this should not be a meeting of this group. Maybe this is one-on-ones. Maybe this is just an email that each person sends to that supervisor. So what are some other forms of communication maybe that might replace a meeting? Are there some other things that I haven't discussed here? Yeah, emails, a lot of the time, a simple email. Sometimes it's a phone call, right? Because sometimes maybe, yeah, there we go. Phone call group. Yeah, sometimes it's not even as intense as an email. Sometimes it's just an instant message that you send to somebody. So Teams group chat or Slack group chat or Gmail, GChat, something like that. A survey I think is so awesome as an option to replace a meeting, especially if your goal for the meeting would be to just gather information. If you're just trying to gather information, a survey can be a really helpful piece of that. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you never have a meeting, right? So, but a survey can you can gauge people's interest on something, you can gauge people's opinions on something, and they might be more willing to be more honest and be more upfront with a survey than they might be in person. You can use that information then and say, all right, I've done this survey, and I've narrowed it down. These are the most popular things. Let's have a meeting to discuss the pros and cons of each one of those. That would be a much more productive meeting than starting off with here's a billion options, or let's come up with a billion options, right? You can be a little bit more targeted. Talking in person, yes, sometimes you just have to stand up and walk over to the other person's desk and talk to them. Sending a text, sending a G chat or a group chat. These are all, yeah, having a reference document. Sometimes, like we said, you don't need a meeting because this is something that somebody is maybe it's not frequent that they're going to need this information, especially if it's not frequent and it's not something that they're going to be using maybe every day. Like we were talking about the expense report thing. The other one that comes to mind is, human resources sending out information about how to sign up for health insurance during the sign up period in November. It's helpful to have meetings to maybe discuss changes in the plans that might be available to you, but the actual, like, how do you do this? That's not helpful to have as a meeting. People aren't going to remember it by the time they actually go to do it. It's much more helpful to have that in a written form that people can refer back to and look at as they're maybe choosing what they want or selecting the information that they need to put into the equipment or the forms.
We have a couple
Yeah.
over from chat. Memo.
Yeah, a memo is a classic, definitely.
And then working in a shared common software program even, or a shared space like SharePoint,
Yes.
Common Drive.
Yes, you can see what other people are doing. You can see, you can also comment on work. You can ask questions and get feedback. Yes, for sure. Those are great points. Awesome. Snail mail. Yeah, sometimes depending on what it is, it's certified mail maybe. You like, I really need to know that you have gotten this information and you acknowledge that you have gotten it. All right. So let's talk a little bit about priorities. So this is with respect, your priority is not my priority, right? So when we are choosing to have a meeting, we want to think about some of this prioritization. And so we want to think, this is important to me. This may not necessarily be important to other people, right? And sometimes we get caught up in, I need this information right away, or I am very concerned about this, and we don't necessarily take into account that other people may have other things that are more important to them, and that scheduling a meeting may not be the most helpful thing. So priority maps. Important things aren't always urgent, and urgent things aren't always important. So let's take a look at this. We'll see if I can pull this over. There we go. So this is a priority map. We're going to have some of these resources available to you. We're going to drop them into chat, but we also will send you both this as well as some instructional information about using these in the future, so that, again, we're having this webinar right now. We're going to walk through how to use these, but I don't expect that you're going to refer back to this every time you go to use it. So having a little blurb about what it is and what it's meant for, but having a priority map. So on this priority map, we can see there are at the top here, excuse me, there's things like high impact, high risk, high urgency, high cost. And so it might be your vertical axis here might be high impact to low impact, or it might be, low risk to high risk. And then the X axis here, it could be low effort to high effort, or it could be known things to unknown things, or low importance to high importance. So having these, you can use any one of those to try and gauge things like, is this, where does this fall in terms of impact versus effort? Is it a very high impact with a low effort? Is it a very low impact with a high effort, right? If you're falling down in this quadrant, maybe we don't have a meeting that is an all hands emergency meeting, right? If it is maybe in this top one, maybe we do need to have, this is a fire alarm, we got to have everybody on it. But this will help you hopefully gauge things in terms of what what warrants a meeting for one? Does it warrant a meeting? And then how much inconvenience can you put on other people in terms of their attendance at this meeting, and maybe who should be at this meeting as well. All right. So that priority map hopefully will be a helpful tool for you as you go through in terms of trying to determine some of those things. How about inviting the right people for this, right? It's a little bit of a three bears situation, right? We don't want to invite everybody to a meeting because that is going to be not as effective. We're going to get maybe information that isn't relevant to the goal of our meeting. Everything is going to come back to that goal. So are we inviting the right people who are going to help us achieve the goal? We need to have at least as many people as will be affected or impacted by this meeting or the decisions made during this meeting. But we don't want a bunch of people who maybe aren't impacted, where they don't need to be there. Sometimes people feel obligated to come to meetings just because they were invited. So we want to figure out that balance. So do we have any comments about things so far?
We don't.
Excellent. All right. So our next resource here is to help you kind of figure out this, because sometimes it can be difficult, especially I find that sometimes people, they don't want to offend somebody, right? And sometimes people do get very offended if they are not included in a meeting. They feel like they're being excluded or that their input isn't wanted. And sometimes you're like, it's not that, it's just that like you didn't need to be there, right? And then the opposite is true as well. Sometimes people are like, I don't want to go to this meeting. And you're like, you are essential to this meeting. You have to come because your input this is either going to directly affect you, and I want to make sure that you are like aware and on board with decisions that we're making, or I need your expertise to solve this. I need you to be there. So this hopefully as a matrix will help you kind of determine where people fall. Right? So at the very top here, we've got high influence, and then the bottom we have low influence. So high influence might be somebody like a supervisor, right? They have a lot of influence on this project, but it's not necessarily just supervisors. So it might be somebody who also has expertise in the area, right? Or it might be somebody who is, if you are a local agency, maybe it is somebody who is a decision maker for your local agency. Maybe it is an important stakeholder in a project. Are there other things, maybe, Lori, that have some high influence that I've missed?
Well, power and authority by role. So if you don't have the ability to make a decision, you don't have the authority, but you need somebody in the room, think of that.
Yes, excellent. All right. And then what else do we have? At this side, we have high impact versus low impact on the other side. So if we have somebody who has a very high impact to this, or is going to be highly impacted by this, should we invite that person to this meeting? So, you know, if you fall into this high impact and also high influence, we want to communicate frequently. We probably want that person to be at our meeting. And if they aren't at that meeting, we want to make sure that we are maybe getting their information beforehand, getting their, schedules sometimes don't work, right? But this would be somebody that we want to invite them to our meeting. If they are in this low influence but high impact area, we want to make sure that we're keeping them informed. So maybe they don't get an invite to the meeting, but maybe you include them on meeting minutes or follow-up messages after the meeting. If they are high influence and low impact, you just need to, unless things are going badly, they can probably just coast, right? We might not need to communicate a whole lot with them. And they probably don't have a whole lot of interest in whatever it is that we're discussing on like a very granular level, right? They get informed of what the decisions are that are coming out of a meeting, maybe not even as long as it isn't something that is directly going to affect them, right? And then if you have somebody who is low impact and low influence, maybe inform them as needed if it's something that is going to affect them, because something one person might shift to different quadrants, depending on other things that are going on, right? This person may have been kind of in the forum as needed, and then someone goes on parental leave, and now they are the main person for this project. They become the point contact. All right, well, they have shifted from over here, inform as needed. They are now up here. We need to communicate frequently with them, right? And vice versa, as a project drops off. So my background is I'm a geotechnical engineer. So oftentimes during projects, I was very, very involved at the beginning of the project when earthwork was being done, whether it was a road or a building or whatever, very involved. And then as the project goes on, I don't care about what kind of finishes are being put on this building. I don't need to come to these meetings anymore. My usefulness has expired. So I now become kind of inform as needed, or kind of maybe even the keep satisfied. I don't need to be involved on a regular basis. If something is happening and you need our expertise, then yep, loop me back in. But a lot of these meetings I don't need to be involved in anymore.
Brian had a good comment in the chat suggesting when meetings are counterproductive to operations.
All right.
That we're not pulling people in unless they need to be there.
Yes, exactly. If we have too many people going to too many meetings, we don't get any work done. And especially one of the pet peeves of lots of people is status update meetings that are too frequent, because you're like, I haven't had any time to actually get anything done between the last meeting and now.
Yeah, nothing's changed. That's
Yes,
my report.
status
Yep.
the same. So yes, that is a great point for sure. And keeping in mind this, your direct supervisor, depending on where they fall in this, and also helping to, this hopefully will help to explain both sides of it. Whether it's somebody who is reluctant to come to your meeting because you're like, I don't have time for this. You're like, I really need you there because of XYZ. Or somebody who maybe their nose gets a little bent out of joint because they weren't invited to the meeting. You are happy to put them in this quadrant, keeping them informed, include them on the follow-ups, include them on the meeting minutes, but not having them come to every meeting and waste their time, even if they are maybe willing to have their time wasted. Again, that operational productivity is a factor for sure. All right. So how do you know if someone should be at your meeting? What are some factors that you might want to consider if you are inviting somebody? And this is one of those type in your answer kind of Menti questions. Yeah, if they are a decision maker, for sure. If they are SME, so anybody who's out of the acronym world, SME is a subject matter expert, for sure. If they are the client, yes, you want to make sure that they are being kept in the loop and informed with things. If they are a technical person, that you need their technical expertise, you're maybe solving a problem or making a decision. If they are directly involved with the project, right? Yeah, if you're like a project manager, you probably should be at the meeting about your project. If they are a stakeholder in the work, that's a great way of thinking about it. Let's see, what else do we have? If you need their contribution to a project, for sure. Especially, again, I come back to that construction like coordination type meeting. You might have, maybe they're a vendor, maybe they're a subcontractor. They might only need to come to one or two of your construction progress meetings. But for those meetings, they are going to be important, right? You may not need that person to be either on the agenda or on the invite list for every meeting up to when they are actually needed and their decision and their input is needed. And then after their work is done, they don't need to be invited to this anymore. It's not helpful. All right. Being affected by the decision being made. Yeah, if you have again, that's kind of like a stakeholder type role, right? If your work is going to be impacted by whatever is going to be decided, or maybe solutions that are being proposed at this meeting, or coordination that's being done at this meeting, you probably should have an invite to that. Yeah, I think this is also a great way to think about it. If you have value to add, right? The person who is being invited to a meeting should be able to answer why they are being invited to that meeting, and you as an inviter should be able to answer why are you inviting this person to this meeting. And again, it comes back to that: what is the goal of this meeting? What are we trying to do? Our goal should be something that is specific and measurable and relevant to that person. So if you can't articulate how that person helps you achieve the goal of the meeting, don't invite them. And that, again, it doesn't mean that they are completely cut off from communications. You can include them in meeting minutes. You can include them in emails and whatnot, discussing the meeting, follow-up emails, pre-meeting emails, etc. But they don't have to attend that meeting.
Right, and it also helps, I would think, that to encourage those people that maybe don't get the invite initially, if they do have something of value that they notice from those meeting minutes, to come to you.
Yes.
And say, hey, I think I might add some value to this meeting, and that's okay.
Right. And especially if it's a recurring meeting, again, having an invite to a meeting does not mean that you have that invite is forever. Maybe there is one meeting where it's like, we need to bring this person in for this meeting because of what we're going to discuss. And then they don't have to be involved for everything else. Again, you can still keep them in the loop on things, but they don't have to spend their time in this meeting. Awesome. So we went through our meeting invite matrix. This is a really good way if you are on the opposite side of this. So we're talking about this in terms of you are the person who is inviting people to your meeting. But if you are on the opposite side of this, asking, what is my role? So you might have people who you are dealing with who are inviting you to meetings who have not come to this class. And you're like, I don't know, how do I say I don't want to be here? What is my role is a really great way, because it kind of resets that person to think about, like, why do I want you there? And if they say, oh, I just want to keep you informed, you could say, that's awesome. I would like to be included on the meeting minutes list, but I think I'm going to skip this meeting this time, right? And that way, again, like Lori said, you keep in the loop on things. If there is something that comes up in the future where you're like, oh, actually this time would like to be more than informed, I would like to be involved, it keeps that door open, but it also prevents you from being in meetings where you're not relevant to that meeting. So yeah, what is my role? It's the polite way to ask, why am I here? One of our fellow coworkers here, Pete Torla is notorious for, what is my role at this meeting? And there have been a couple of times where he has caught me with that, where I'm like, I don't know, Pete, you don't have to come, never mind. And then there have been other times where I was like, here's what I need from you. I really need your feedback, or I really need your input on whatever it is that we're talking. All right, so this is another way to kind of think about it in terms of as a inviter of people. Everybody who is at your meeting, you should be able to answer either what you need them to do, what you need them to discuss, or what you need them to decide at this meeting, right? These are some helpful ways to think about, like, what is the role of that person at this meeting? This can also be a really good icebreaker for a newly formed, I know we hate icebreakers, we'll talk about them later on, but this can be a really helpful thing for newly formed teams to establish roles and responsibilities. You can kind of go around the room, or maybe you can pair people up and have them, discuss things. It can be helpful to identify some maybe gaps in communications where two people think that they are both doing the same thing. All right, so agendas. Let's talk a little bit about good, bad, ugly agendas. So what's wrong with an agenda that just has a title and who's going to be on there, and then new business, old business? If that is all that's on your agenda, what are some problems with that? Yeah. Nothing to guide the conversation. You can't plan a discussion, right? If I get that agenda, I don't know what the heck we're talking about, especially as somebody who is maybe new to this meeting and is being invited in. People can't prep for this meeting. You don't have any goals for the meeting. It's way too vague. There's no direction. Even if somebody is a really great meeting facilitator, how are they supposed to facilitate a discussion when all you have is new business, old business? And I have seen these types of agendas, right? It doesn't outline what we're trying to talk about. Let's see, it wastes time. You don't know what's being covered. You can't be prepared. Yes, it's going to be very ineffective and it's going to be very frustrating for people. It doesn't help people decide whether they need to be there. Yes, it's not smart. And I see, so a couple people kind of got onto this, but there's another specific thing. It easily gets off track because the other piece of it is that we don't have any time, like, how long are we going to talk about new business? How long are we going to talk about old business? So some agenda items, now your agenda doesn't have to include all of these things, but it should include some of them. So basic info, who is coming, who's invited, when is it, where is it, what time is it, all that. The second item here is the most important. What are we trying to do? What's the desired outcome? What is the goal of this meeting? Action items, if this is a recurring meeting, this is a good place to put the action items right at the top of here are things that maybe old business. Here are things that are unresolved from last time. If you are doing an icebreaker or an introduction, giving some people some warning about that can be helpful, especially if you've got folks who maybe are a little bit more reserved, so that they have some time to kind of prepare themselves for, like, if you're going to ask them for a fun fact about themselves, let them know that ahead of time, because I know I have been asked that in the moment, and my brain just goes blank. I've never done anything interesting in my entire life, right? Which is not true. I've done all sorts of interesting things. What are the roles? If you're going to have people who you need to do specific things during the meeting, making sure those people understand what those roles are going to be. Any activities that you might be doing with this, and also maybe things that people need to bring for that to happen, like if you need to bring a laptop or something. Discussion topics, what are we talking about? And then the second to last one is really important. How long are we going to talk about it? Because we want to have that as at least a guideline, right? And then any associated documents or review material so that people know if they need to bring something or what they need to look over. When we're sending out an agenda, we want to make sure that we are sending it out with enough time for people to review that stuff. And we also want to say that not every agenda is going to be exactly the same, right? That list of topics, and these slides will be available to you. We'll send them out, don't worry. The agendas for one meeting might not be the same as the next, even if it is a recurring meeting, right? It isn't a copy paste. You want to make sure that it is tailored for each meeting, and you want to make sure that it's reviewed for each meeting. So an agenda review, this is something that bothers me a lot, right? You should, if you're going to do an agenda review, you need to do it well or don't even bother, right? Sometimes people send out an agenda and they're like, review this, and the agenda is being sent out like 45 minutes before the meeting. Okay, if I see the email and I actually am able to look at it and form some coherent thoughts about it, and give you feedback about it, how on earth are you going to incorporate that before our meeting? It's just not realistic, right? So it is good to send out an agenda for people to look at ahead of time, so that if they have questions or they're like, maybe this already was resolved, we already talked about it, something like that, you can incorporate that before you have your meeting. Maybe you find out, never mind, we don't even need a meeting because the problems that we were going to solve for this meeting, they've already been taken care of. Probably not likely, but you might be able to shorten your meeting or shift the direction of the meeting. So you want to send it out with enough time for people to comment on it. You want to make sure everybody's going to be on the same page with this agenda. We all know what the goal of this meeting is and why we're coming to it and how to be prepared for it. We want to establish those roles and responsibilities. Again, like if you're having somebody do a particular task during the meeting, making sure that they know it ahead of time. And like if you are assigning someone to take meeting minutes, making sure like they know ahead of time what that's going to be. Making sure that the right topics are on the agenda to meet whatever the goal is going to be. If you're trying to make a decision and you leave off some key points that are going to help you, if you're trying to make a decision, you want to talk about what the options are, what the pros and cons of all those options are. If you don't have some of those things listed out, maybe, or, what are the consequences to this? Who's going to be impacted? Some of those types of things, right? And then you want to make sure that you have enough time to discuss those items. And you want to put how much time do I think is it going to take to discuss these items? Because that is going to help you as a facilitator keep things on track. All right, so discussion versus productive discussion. You don't just want to talk about things. You want to, move things towards a actual goal. So here is a question for you. How can you make sure that your discussion leads to some results? Ask questions, stay focused. Yeah, open-ended questions, guiding as a facilitator, circling back to your goal, right? Is the discussion that we're having, does it relate to the goal? Asking some leading questions, pulling some information out of people. Yeah, next steps, focusing on solutions rather than focusing on problems. These are all good things. All right, so etiquette. So etiquette is more than, just saying please and thank you. There's some meeting etiquette rules. So maybe what are some meeting etiquette rules that you think are important? Waiting your turn. Yeah, being respectful, not taking things personally, not interrupting other people, staying on task, having that meeting start when you say you're going to start, end when you say you're going to end. And keeping people on task so that you move things along the way they need to be. Perfect. All right, so there is a little bit of difference between in-person and virtual etiquette, right? There are some things that might be okay in person that aren't okay virtually and vice versa. So are there some things specifically that you want to talk about in terms of virtual meeting etiquette rules? Having your camera, wearing pants, yes. Being muted, or also I think just in general, having your microphone muted unless you're talking, but also making sure that you unmute yourself, right? That's frustrating too, where somebody is always muted. You can see that they're talking, you can't hear them. Raising your hand, yeah, a lot of the meeting facilitation softwares allow you to raise your hand so that people know, hey, I have a comment. Being aware of your background, the noise, the image behind you, for sure. All right, so a big question is camera on versus camera off, right? So some considerations for that are, is your internet connection good enough that you can have the camera on and not be laggy and terrible? Are there distractions in your background? Maybe you need to blur your background or have a virtual background. Maybe through no fault of your own, you're traveling or whatever, and you have to stop at a coffee shop for this meeting. Having your mic muted for sure, because there's going to be ambient noise, and then also, having your background blurred so that people aren't, seeing random people ordering coffee behind you. Thinking about maybe what other people are doing. If you are the only person with your camera on and everybody else has their camera off, that's also a little awkward. So generally speaking, following whatever maybe if you are working with a client, following whatever the client is, following whoever the most important person in the group is doing, or the majority of the group, that's important. But having your camera on, I really recommend having your camera on. You can see people's facial cues. You can see like somebody is raising their hand and they would like to speak. You get that, and it is a more effective way of communication than not having it on. So here's a question for you guys. Do you record your meetings? Yes, no, or maybe not that you know of, right? So a lot of people are saying no. A couple people say they're not sure. All right.
Sometimes. Yeah,
Sometimes, yeah. All right, I've got another question for you here. What are the pros and cons of recording a meeting? Accurate minutes. It's a public record. FOIA, yeah, depending on what agency you work for, the FOIA is important. Record of that conversation. People can refer back to it at a later time. Yes, you have that access to go back for sure. Liability. AI minute takers, yeah, sometimes there are some softwares where it only the artificial intelligence to record your meeting minutes for them, that meeting only work if you are recording it. The company policy issues, right? And the FOIA and the liability, that's a double-edged sword, right? There might be some meetings where you are less liable if you record it, and then other ones where you are more liable if you record it, right? My recommendation is that you have a policy about when do we record meetings, why do we record meetings, why do we not record meetings. The other piece of this that is important is that when we are doing these types of recordings, it's like a phone call, right? I know we got people from all over the country. So I would recommend that you look up whatever your rules are for your state. Michigan is a two-party consent state. So when you are doing recording, you want to make sure people understand that they are being recorded. In Zoom, when you join a Zoom session that is being recorded, it will pop up a little note for you to say that that it's being recorded. If you don't leave the meeting, it is an implied consent. But that's something that is important, especially depending on what your state's laws are, right? But I do encourage you, you should have a policy for why do we record meetings or why don't we record meetings, and when do we not? Here's another question for you. Are you using artificial intelligence in your workplace? Your choices here are yes, no, and the robots will hear you. All right, so we've got a decent amount of people who are saying no. I would be surprised. So like AI right now, if you're using closed captioning, that's AI. We do not have a person, we don't have an intern, chained to a desk here who's furiously typing as I talk. That's being done by AI. So you probably are using more AI than you think you are in your day-to-day work. If you are doing recorded meeting minutes through AI or transcripts or whatnot, through your whatever Teams or Zoom that you're using, that's also AI. So those virtual assistants, they can do things like record transcripts or write meeting minutes. They can summarize meeting minutes. They can catch up latecomers. That's a great feature, right? If you join a meeting late, it can give you a little summary of what has been discussed already. It can be helpful if you're trying to schedule meetings to get everybody's, many people's schedules all coordinated. You can use them to write agendas. There are some cybersecurity concerns with some of the AI virtual assistants, even with just some of the online virtual meetings. We had a story recently. A relative of one of our coworkers had an internal meeting at their company, and a AI bot disguised as an IT staff member. So it popped up with the name of somebody who worked in their company and was an IT person, popped up, and in the meeting chat asked for login credentials for one of the members. And it seemed like, it had the right name and everything. And that was something, I have never experienced that, but there are some of these situations where we do need to be maybe a little bit more cautious when we're thinking about, some of the virtual assistants and maybe what has access to it and what our cybersecurity concerns may be around some of those tools.
And in that situation, it was alarming to us because it was convincing enough to get the people to give the information.
Yes, because it seemed legit.
It seemed legit. And how much are we told, right? Don't give that information, and it still was persuasive.
Yes. Yes.
So
We're
be
definitely,
aware.
we're all susceptible to this for sure. All right, so let's talk briefly about meeting minutes. Something to be aware of with meeting minutes is that you are not a stenographer, right? This is not a court document. You are not typing down everything that everybody says and keeping it as a record, right? Have you ever had your meeting minutes subpoenaed? Your choices are yes, no, or legally I'm not allowed to answer this. Most of us are saying no. This is a actual thing that can happen, right? If you are a subject of a lawsuit, meeting minutes can potentially be something that is part of a discovery, part of a subpoena. You have to turn them over, right? So we're not a stenographer and we're not writing down absolutely everything. And with the idea that, hey, in the future, maybe someday these are going to get read out in court, what are some things that should go into meeting minutes? Who's there? Yes, that's excellent. Action items. Action items we're going to talk about in a little bit. Action items should definitely go in your meeting minutes. Decisions that were made. motions, facts. Yes, if something has material fact with the project has changed, for sure. Date, yeah, when do we have this meeting? When do we have this meeting? Who was there? Action items, for sure. Conclusions or decisions that were made. Yeah, we're on the same page here. All right, what should not go in meeting minutes? Quotes, yes, squabbles. We do not need to include, again, the exact thing that someone was called during a meeting. Maybe unprofessional language, for sure. Opinions, jokes, editorial comments, personal comments. Yeah, we want to put facts in our meeting minutes. We don't want to put opinions about things. We don't want to put side conversations and things. Your meeting minutes should be concise. Yeah, we don't need to record everybody's opinion about something, right? We just want to record what the decision was after everybody had the discussion. We don't need to incorporate what everybody thought about each option or all of that. What was the decision that was made? You might include maybe what the potential options were, but we don't need to include everybody's thoughts about every one of those things, right? The idea here is that we, for one, we don't want to put in anything that might be incriminating, right? Or embarrassing for people in the future, because these can be part of a public record. They can be subpoenaed. And so we want to include things like who was going to be there, why did we have the meeting, what happened, what kind of action items. We want them to be concise, easy to skim, and easy to get the picture of what the meeting was about and what was the outcome of that meeting, right? So before we have the meeting, we establish that we want to have an outcome by the end of the meeting, and then in our meeting minutes, we want to record what was that outcome. All right, here's a good question for you guys. Who should take meeting minutes? So the person running the meeting, somebody designated by the person running the meeting, or everybody in the meeting? All right, the majority of you are with me on this. It should be somebody designated by the person running the meeting. So trying to, unless your meeting is very small, maybe it's only like 3 people, it can be really difficult to run the meeting and also record what is going on, right? Because you are keeping track of time and you're keeping track of the discussion and you're guiding the discussion, and maybe you're encouraging somebody who's maybe a little bit reluctant to share to be involved in the discussion. You want to delegate that recording of action items, recording of decisions, recording of discussion to one person. A few of you here said everybody in the meeting. This is my most hated thing, right? Because then it falls on one person to smush all of those people's meeting minutes together. And that is not a good use of anybody's time, right? It's much better for everybody to be involved in the conversation. One person is recording things, and then, right, we're going to send the meeting minutes out to everybody. If you have things that, like, you jotted down a note that didn't get recorded into the meeting minutes that you think should be there, you have the opportunity to add it and amend those meeting minutes. But otherwise, it really should be designated to a single person. Like I said, that way you send the meeting minutes out afterwards, review them, and if you have things that are that you think are different, you have the ability to amend that. The other thing about reviewing them promptly is to make sure that if there is an action item that you know that it's yours, right? I think some of us have been in that case where you had an action item, or an action item was discussed. It wasn't specifically assigned, and then you get the meeting minutes and you're like, apparently I'm doing that. I did not know. This gives you a chance to maybe rebut that if you get voluntold for something.
It's a good idea too to consider having a 24-hour period there where you
Yes.
have consideration of those minutes and those action items, so that you have a window of, I'm going to do this before I forget, before
Yeah.
everybody else forgets.
Yes.
And I can bring things to people's attention quickly, so we don't
Yes.
get bogged down like 3 days from now.
Especially, the opposite can happen as well, where maybe somebody starts working on something because they thought, like, I guess that was mine to do. And you end up with duplicate work because of that. Or the opposite of nobody's working on it because I thought it was somebody else's problem. some of those, sorry, I skipped this one. Some tools for tasks. So Task Manager can be really helpful for assigning tasks. OneNote, some of these other tools, you want to make sure though that everybody in the project team or everybody who's in the meeting is familiar with where those things live and have access to things, especially if you are working with a group of maybe multiple companies, multiple agencies, making sure that everybody has that. I do want to caution, yes, AI can do your meeting minutes. They can summarize your meeting minutes, but they also can make mistakes, right? Maybe they misheard something, right? Sometimes you get words in there that you're like, that's not what I said at all. The voice recognition is generally fairly good, but there's still some work to be done, right? Especially with female voices, sometimes don't get as accurately transcribed as other voices do. And then just in general, things like acronyms, they'll use the wrong letters, right? Because the letters sound similar. You want to make sure that those types of things are reviewed by a human being before they get sent out to people, right? You don't want to just take meeting minutes that are generated by AI and then just, without reviewing them at all, send them out, especially if you're sending them outside of whatever your organization is, right? It's bad enough if you distribute them within your organization without reviewing them. That's bad. Don't do that. But especially if you are sending them outside of your organization without a review, do not do that. I also would recommend that you have a policy that says this is not allowed for our organization. All right, so let's talk a little bit about running a meeting, right? One thing that is going to be important is to establish some ground rules. You can also call these session principles or meeting rules. Lori's class is going to really dive into this side of things. I'm just briefly kind of skimming over things. So our ground rules, two things that are important here. They need to be agreed upon by the group and have some discussion with them. And the reason for that is that once we've agreed upon them as a group, we've all bought into this idea of what these rules are going to be, then if things change, we have the ability to amend them or adapt them to fit our group, right? And we can have more discussion for that. So what are some good ground rules or some good session principles for a meeting? It might be something like not interrupting, leaving your phone off or silencing your phone, being respectful, following the time limit for things, attacking the problem, not the person. Yes, I love that. That's great. Actively participating. Yeah, don't sit there all closed off. Being respectful, not talking over one another. These are great. Now we're going in a totally different direction. I have not lost my marbles here. Is a hot dog a sandwich? Yes, it has all the components of a sandwich. No, it lacks the essential elements of a sandwich. Or what is going on? How did we get here?
It's a taco.
All right, we are definitely not in agreement on this one. So a question like this is called a thunk. It's a simple question. The idea of it is that it's going to spark some debate. There's lots of them. I have a big list of them for you that we will put in the chat. The idea with a thunk is that we want to spark some debate and have people disagree with one another, right? That's okay. We want people to have differing opinions on something, and we want that to happen in kind of a low stakes way. So especially if you have a conversation that's going to maybe have a little bit of disagreement, or you want differing ideas, this is a great way to start a meeting, right? We started off with our maybe people are kind of chit-chatting with things. This is a great way to have an icebreaker. People hate icebreakers. I hate icebreakers.
I hate icebreakers.
Everybody hates icebreakers. I'm curious if there is an icebreaker that you do not hate. The best icebreaker for a large group that I ever participated in, it was like a bingo card, and the bingo slots were all things that were really kind of generic, like I have a tattoo, or like I still live in my hometown, or maybe I have been on a cruise, things like that. They were very kind of open things, and the idea was that you went around the room. It was a large room, a big group of people. You went around the room and you tried to fill out your bingo card by meeting somebody. So like, maybe I was left-handed, so that was one where I'm like, oh, I can fill that out for a bunch of people, right? It was fast. The two truths and a lie is kind of the same idea. These are great. Tower of marshmallows and straws. Something that you have in common. Yeah, go ahead.
Funny workplace safety videos?
Yes, yeah. So something that is going to be fairly light, something that is going to be maybe easy for people. I like so the one condiment you keep, one that you get rid of, that's kind of a thunk style question. So I'm going to go through a few discussion strategies depending on what you're trying to do. So if you are going to be doing something specific, prepare people for what kind of what the meeting is going to be about, and maybe some of these things in your email communication, in the agenda, maybe with attachments if you have something that you want people to review before the meeting. I'm curious about discussion prompts that you guys use to get a conversation started. People have talked about kind of these open-ended questions. I have a few here that hopefully will help you out, but I'm wondering if anybody's got good ones. How was your weekend? Asking their opinion. Yeah, so how was your weekend is a great way to kind of set the tone for a meeting. If you are trying to solve a problem, yeah, what is the status of this thing? Calling on specific people, sure, asking their opinion, asking the question and then not filling the silence. That is so difficult to do, but that is great, right? If you just sit there and let it percolate a little bit, that is going to get people, somebody is going to eventually get so uncomfortable that they will break the silence. What's working, what's not working, what's getting in the way? Yeah, these are great. All right, so some discussion prompts to get the conversation started. If we're trying to get people on the same page, we're doing a project kick off, or maybe we've had a setback on our project. I love this one. So this is a newspaper headline. So maybe at the beginning of our project, or maybe we've had a setback. At the end of a project, what would we want the newspaper to say about this project? What do we want the subheading to be? What do we want the title to be? What kind of photo are they going to use? Maybe what bullet points for the project would you want highlighted? Who would give a quote? Is this something where you want the mayor to talk? Or maybe it's a big project, like we want the governor to talk. Maybe we want the president to talk. And then what would they say about the project? Maybe it's, we want a resident. We want somebody who is a resident to talk about how much this project has improved their day-to-day life, or how happy they are with things, right? What do we, does the headline, is it going to be about how much this project saved money, or maybe about how much this project was, it was on time, or it's really aesthetically pleasing project? What do we want that to say? So this is great. We can also reverse it. What do we not want written in the paper? And this can kind of get everybody kind of on the same page of like, what are our priorities for this project? And how can we move that forward, right? How can we, we're all on the same team. We want to move forward, whether you're at the beginning of the project or maybe you've had a setback. Houston, we have a problem. So maybe you're calling a meeting because we need to solve a problem, right? Have you ever attended a meeting that turned into a vent session instead of finding the solution to the problem, right? We're going to this meeting, we're like, oh, this is the problem. And then instead of actually resolving the problem, we just talk about the problem. Yeah, it looks like many of us have had this experience. We want to get to the root of the problem. We don't just want to talk about the problem. So a great way for this is 5 whys. You might not end up using all 5, but you start off with, why do we have this problem? And then from there, why is that happening? And then why is that happening? Why is that happening? Eventually, you're going to drill down to the root cause of whatever it is that's going on. And once you know the root cause of whatever is going on, okay, now we can work on solving that. But sometimes the problem is kind of amorphous. It's hard to wrap your hands around it. And this is a great way. Also, this is a great way to get everybody on the same page, because maybe there is a communication breakdown that is part of the reason that this problem is happening. Maybe it is a personnel issue. We don't have the staff, or we don't have the equipment, whatever that might be. This is going to get you to the root cause of whatever that problem is. In terms of organizing our thoughts, maybe we need to help choose a direction that we're going to go in. Are you familiar with SWOT analysis? So this is again, yes, no, or does it involve rappelling off of a roof? Some of you may be really familiar with this, some of you may not be. It seems like a good amount of you are not familiar with what a SWOT analysis is. This is awesome. We'll go through it. Okay, so a SWOT analysis. SWAT, this is different than like busting a door down, and rescuing hostages. Different thing. This SWOT is strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So what can be helpful for this is that for all of these things, the newspaper headline, the 5 whys, this one, it can be really helpful to give people, maybe a blank piece of paper and have them go through it at the beginning of your meeting or whenever you have deemed it appropriate in the timeline for your meeting. Have them kind of go through it by themselves and then give them 5-10 minutes to gather their thoughts a little bit. Or maybe you give this to them before the meeting and ask them to come prepared with this done. But having each person kind of go through it by themselves and then combining is usually going to give you better ideas. And it also means that people are going to be prepared. It isn't like, well, what do you think? I agree with so-and-so. They probably are going to have some nuance to what their answers are going to be. So the SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So you go through and maybe it's your company or your agency. What kind of strengths do you have compared to another organization that is similar to you? Maybe what kind of weaknesses do you have compared to another organization similar to you? And then in terms of whatever the project is going to be, maybe what kind of opportunities. So maybe you are an organization that is really great at grant writing, right? That's an opportunity. It means you can go after things. What are some things that might be threatening in terms of this project as to maybe reasons why we're not going to go after it or reasons why it isn't as desirable? This can be a really helpful decision-making tool. Maybe it helps you to decide a direction to go or a project to take on or not take on. This is a really classic one. And if you Google SWOT analysis, you're going to get all sorts of resources for it, as well as we'll provide some things to you in our follow-up email as well.
So Kristen had a good question in the chat. What do you suggest if there's a problem and it may be important to constructively give space to share feelings and thoughts? And that's actually a really good question about what we're going to go deeper into in the Navigating Difficult Situations training that's coming up in the next few weeks. Actually.
Yes, excellent. All right, managing your time. So one of the things that's really helpful if you're trying to manage your time is to use a timer. Use your phone. You can set up your phone. You can set up a physical timer. They're cheap. Having a timer, and also you can. I really recommend that the meeting facilitator be the person that is keeping track of the time, because maybe the discussion is going really well, and we want to continue that discussion. So if we are trying to guide the discussion, and we get maybe off track a little bit, right? Things you want to think about are redirecting that discussion back to our goal. What is our goal for the meeting? We've gotten off track, redirect it back to the goal. Reiterating what those goals are. Hey guys, this maybe is a good conversation, but not for the goal of this meeting. And then reinforcing those meeting rules of like, you guys this is productive for you. It's not productive for the rest of us. Encouraging those folks to follow up with that. This is something where maybe we put it in a parking lot. And having a parking lot, so for our ideas, having maybe a physical whiteboard or a piece of paper, something that you can write down, things that are important, but not right now. One of the things that I kind of have as a peeve is a lot of times parking lots get used just to avoid a discussion. Somebody brings something up and everybody else in the room is like, that's not going to work. We all know that's not going to work. We put it in a parking lot and then we never talk to that person about why that idea wasn't feasible, wasn't relevant, whatever. It just feels very alienating for that person. You end up with like kind of us versus them situation. So don't use parking lots to avoid a discussion. You want to schedule a time to address any parked ideas. So maybe it's the next meeting, maybe it's a different meeting. And the other piece of this is so that they don't get forgotten, they need to be included in your meeting minutes so that you have an opportunity to revisit it. Maybe it is something where you have a discussion one-on-one with somebody about why their idea was not a bad idea, but it's not a good idea for this project, right? That way, that person has the knowledge and they get that learning opportunity. I see this happen a lot of times with younger engineers. You know, they're really enthusiastic, they have a great idea, but everybody else is like, that's not going to work. They're not going to know why unless you tell them, and then you're going to stifle them. You do that enough times where you ignore their idea, they're not going to stop volunteering things. So when we talk about action items, we want these also to be included in our meeting minutes. We need to include a who. The biggest piece of an action item is the person who's going to be doing the action item. You need to have it be clearly assigned to a person. There needs to be a name. Another peeve of mine is when you just have an organization is going to take care of this. Who at that organization is taking care of it? A specific task and what the duties associated with that are going to be. And then having a clear timeline. Does this need to be done before the next meeting? Does this need to be done even sooner? Does this need to be done after the next meeting? What is the timeline that we expect this action item to be completed by? So what do you do when things have stalled after your meeting? Nag. Sometimes. Go in person, circle back with them, send a reminder. You have to follow up, right? Emails and phone calls, depending on, you want to have some communication. So a lot of times things stall, and you can follow up in a kind way. Hey, maybe this slipped off your radar. Maybe you got busy. Is this something that maybe needs to get assigned to a different person? But just being upset that things have stalled out is not productive for anybody's. You want to have some communication, and you want that communication to, again, reiterate, like, what if there's a roadblock, how can we help? If there are other issues that are happening, what can we do to unstall? What can we do to get us moving again? So after a meeting, we need to have some follow-up. And that follow-up, like Lori said, you want to do it within 24 hours while people still remember what they said during the meeting and what they may have agreed to. So that follow-up, following up, how do you follow up? So maybe it's an email, maybe it's email that with some action items in it, and you say, hey, I'm busy, meeting minutes, full meeting minutes to follow as soon as possible. But in the meantime, here is the condensed version. Whether that is a email that gets sent out, whether that in terms of what that is, it's going to depend. Maybe it is put on a SharePoint. Maybe it is posted in some other way. Again, it's going to depend. You want to follow up within 24 hours, but depending on the way that you're following up, maybe it's right after the meeting. Within 24 hours, while stuff is still fresh in your mind, is a really great goal that you should aim to achieve. Even, again, some type of follow-up. And if it isn't like meeting minutes or something that is more substantial, letting people know why that's not going to happen. Maybe you're traveling, something like that. That's reasonable. People understand that. And then who? Remember that if you assign some people in that meeting invite matrix to keep informed, keep them informed. Don't forget about those folks. Some components of our meeting follow-up message. We want some action items. Who owns those action items? Decisions that were made, so somebody who is asking to be kept informed knows what's going on. And then what's the next meeting information? Who's going to be attending that meeting, or who needs to attend that meeting? You want to include that as well. So maybe somebody's like, oh, I don't need to be there anymore. I helped make that decision, and now I'm hands off. All right, do we have questions? We've gotten to exactly 11:30, so.
We don't have any questions yet, but we invite you, if you have any questions, put them in the chat or into the Q&A.
Excellent. All right, so my last slide here is the certificate of attendance, which I should be able to put into the chat. All right, so there is a SurveyMonkey link in the chat right now. You need to complete that SurveyMonkey link in order to get your certificate of attendance. Your certificate of attendance will be emailed to you, but not immediately. It's going to take a little bit of time. You also have the opportunity during that to do an evaluation about what you learned today, maybe new topics that you would like to hear about in the future. In general, what you thought of today's session. And we appreciate that feedback. I do read all of them. And those are also anonymous. So I do want to make sure that is, if I appreciate honesty in terms of the feedback that we get. But yeah, you end up with two different surveys. You don't know that there's two different surveys, but there's two different surveys. So the evaluation one, you can answer honestly, and then you fill out the certificate of attendance. And yes, that is perfect. So before you leave, make sure you grab the Survey Monkey link so that you get that. And then you're free to go after that. Lori and I are going to hang out. If you have any problems with the Survey Monkey link, let us know in the chat. But thank you all for attending today. I really appreciated your time. And hopefully you can sign up for Lori's class in the future.
Yeah, and I would add to that, if you found today's topic helpful, I would want you to consider that this is just half
Yes.
of what makes a good facilitator. We talked about the what today, and in the training called Meetings That Work, Navigating Difficult Situations, which many of you have also already signed up for, that talks about the how.
Yes. Yes. I kind of gave you the structure for how a meeting should run, and then Lori's going to give you all the guts, all the good stuff to actually make it work. So like I talked about the what, she's going to talk about how do we make this work, and especially how do we make it work if maybe people are at odds with one another. And yes, it is still available. You're still able to sign up for that one. Let me look up our training page, and I can put that into the chat. Here we go. I put the link to our training page in the chat right now. We're offering this class again. So if you had, maybe you have coworkers and like, this was really great information, I'd love for them, I wish they could have made it. We are offering this class again. And then Lori's class will be offered twice as well. So thank you to everybody. Like I said, we will hang out while you guys are filling out the survey. I really recommend you fill the survey out right now in case you do have issues. And let me put that in the chat once more. Perfect. All right. So that should take you to a SurveyMonkey link that you'll be able to fill out. And yeah, holler if you have any issues or questions. Again, thank you so much. If you've grabbed that link, you filled out the survey, then you are welcome to continue on with your day. And we do really appreciate that you spent some time with us.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody.
All right, folks, if you are still in the chat, you're welcome to hang out. We'll still be here for a little bit. I'll give you a warning before I close the room, so you won't be surprised. But make sure that you have grabbed that SurveyMonkey link that is in the chat right now. That again is going to be how you get your certificate of attendance. If you're having any issues with it, let me know. The name of the next training is, so we're doing this one again, and then we're doing this one again March 6th, so next week in the afternoon. And then Lori's class is, let's see, what is the first date for it? The 13th. The name of it is Meetings That Work, Skills for Navigating Difficult Situations. And I can put the link to that class into the chat right now. That's for the March 13th session, but there's another session in April.
It's April Fool's Day.
I think it is April Fool's Day. It is April Fool's Day. So if that sounds like it would be better for you, the link for that one is here. And I think we've got a morning and an afternoon session for both of these as well. So yeah, if you have any issues with the SurveyMonkey link, let me know for sure. Sometimes people have some issues if they're attending by themselves. You have to type in the number 0 or else it doesn't let you continue on. There's a question that asks like, did you attend? How many people did you attend with? Something like that. And that's set up for if you are attending as a group, like in a conference room or something. That way all of you still get your certificate of attendance for the class. But it looks like we are dwindling down on how many of you are still in the room. So yeah, if you grabbed the survey link and you completed it and you didn't have any problems, you're free to go. If you are having problems, let us know in the chat and we will happily help you out. Otherwise, thanks again for coming, and we will hopefully see you in a future event.